Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I'll hold this. Not at all suggestive of it. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday. I just wanted to say to you before we begin that I think I've known you for 20 years, and I just wanted to let you know that I think when I first read your work and listening today, I thought, my God, what a brave writer you are. A bold person, and it really has an amazing effect on the quality of life. And I know on the quality of life, knowing you really, I get thank you so much. Thank you. I want to start by asking a question that I think you don't want me to ask. And then we can rehearse the questions I can ask without input. What I'm going to do. I thought that it probably is important to ask about your fame and your comic status. And there's a way in which it's not just that I think all of us are in this room because we all love your writing, but we sort of have protection as a person. So what do you think about that?
Golly, which is my deepest and realist response. It's just like that actually covers what it is. I'm surprised by it. It's nothing I ever expected. I asked it, and it seems a little weird. I can't quite understand it, but I don't understand it. I basically, it seems to present itself as a good thing. I like it, and as I said, I'm touched by it. I think I find myself laughing over it. I think it's a little silly. I'm a very ordinary person. Yeah, I mean, there are writers and there are people who I think who are interesting people, to whom interesting things happen, and they do interesting things, and they. I am, as I say on the soundtrack of the Polymath, I perceive myself as the world's most boring black faggot. That's who I am. I am lucky enough that every once in a while odd language goes pouring through my head. And sometimes I try to write it down, and if I write it down, and sometimes when this bizarre language goes pouring through my head, and I capture some of it, and I write it down, people seem to pay attention to it, and sometimes they pay more attention to it than I had any right to expect them to. And I think, well, gee, again, I'm kind of lucky. One of the things that I've always, one of the books that's always impressed me is Cyril Connolly's Enemies of Promise. It's a wonderful book about writing, and one of the reasons it's a wonderful book about writing is because it's not just about how to write well. Specifically, he takes on the question in the very first pages, how do you write a book that stays on bookstore shelves and that people will want to read 10 years later? So how do you write, and he says, if you do this, you got a chance, in the larger pinball game of becoming a writer who matters. Would I like that to happen? Sure, I would love that to happen. And when I look back at my astonishment, I have 3 or 4 books that have been around for 10 years. I don't, again, you have no way of knowing that it's going to happen, or whether, you spend 6 or 7 years on something like this, and it comes out, and you have no way to know whether it's going to, whether anybody's going to want to read it more than 6 weeks from now, or 6 years, if it's 6 years or 16, that's going to be great. That would be great. But I feel very cut off from it at this point, and it's out there in the world, and it's doing its thing, and it either will or will not, happen. So I just ramble on because the question in a funny way doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
All right, how about this? First, I have to say that I know a bunch of black tigers are more than you. I have to say, frankly. And some white guys too, frankly. So one of the things that I think, part of the reason I want to ask that question is because you have written a very, very moving, a couple of very moving memoirs. And so you do reveal some things about your private life to all of us and to many people in the world. So, but I suspect that there's a distinction between the public, I know that there's a distinction between the public persons and the dynamic. And the private individual, how do you negotiate that? So much what you do reveals things that I think I would want to reveal.
Yeah, well, most of the I think most of the autobiographical work is about really, you will find if you look at it, it's about the first 27 or so years of my life. I think that's probably the most interesting part of my life as if there is something interesting in the life itself, and what is interesting is just how confused I was, and so the books are about trying to get unconfused, trying to how I can. And at this point, I think I'm relatively unconfused, and it contributes to my boredom, rather to not my boredom, but to my not my boredom, but to the lack of interest about why I'm not all that interested. And so I just I wouldn't. I don't. Can you be more specific?
No. I can move on to another question now.
Okay.
We have a limited amount of time, so we'll move on to another question. So we've been talking, I think all day long people have been talking about various parts of your work. I wonder if there's a way that, if there's a general project that you've been trying to achieve over the last decade.
Yeah, I actually have a major project, and it's what has occupied me for probably the last 40 years. My career at this point is now 50 years long. It took me the first 10 to figure out what it was, and that's to present and to put forward a notion of discourse that is nuanced, intricate, responsive to many more things than at first it would look like if you got your idea entirely from reading Foucault. You might get it on your own. Not that there's anything wrong with Foucault's notion as a base. In fact, it is a base for me. But I think I think the whole society, and probably most other societies, really need to share to get together a notion of discourse that, again, that is able to deal with the complexities of life. And it's not any given content that fills these up, that fills up this notion of discourse, but the fact that the model itself for the understanding of what goes on is a rich and complex model, and that's what gives you, that's what makes it living fun. That's what produces that particular kind of joy that Spinoza was after, in the very first sentence of, the inundation of the intellect. I want to, or what he eventually called the intellectual love of God. We know what Spinoza was really meaning. Because he thought that God and nature were the same thing. And I think he was right.
I want to just take a moment to ask you sort of English professor's question.
Please.
And an English professor and actually a librarian's question.
Okay.
So, should we put you on the shelves after E185, or should we put you on the shelves after PS 406 or whatever it is?
We put now we've got My first job was a library page, and I actually had to learn all of them. So what are those numbers for you?
I think that was the, that one was, well, I made it.
Was it 623?
We have actual libraries. One was the black section and one was the women's section.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what the first section is yet.
Well, one of the things, I believe about it, I think the most important political question is the treatment and the condition of women in this society. I think that is that's the most important. For a long time. If you read the biographical stuff, it's all in there. But I think one of the things, however, that's all other oppressions are modeled on that oppression. Racial oppression, homophobia, everything that's wrong with the society is modeled on the patriarchal way that women are treated. And that's got to be something. It's got to be done about that. It's that important.
Chip, let me ask you one other question before I open it up to the audience about that. One thing that I find delicious in your writing is, in fact, the sex. I really do. And it's a little naughty reading it. It's quite good today. But most of the encounters in the non-speculative world that is sex between men, and a lot of what the spaces that I find sort of delicious and wonderful to see presented, to glad to see presented are spaces in which they're only having sex. So I know that you are deeply concerned about patriarchy and oppression of women. How does the descriptions of sexual practice only between men, how does that relate to female audiences or our brothers?
Well, the other thing, of course, is, as I said, that is the major given. When the first, half dozen books I wrote, starting with Jewels of Actor and The Fall of the Towers, and these really rather juvenile books, those were my attempts to deal with it head on, Babel 17. And then I realized, as things went a little further, I realized you're not, simply because you are gay, you only have so much you can say from first-hand experience. I was married for 13 years, and I have a daughter. I have a family, and my daughter is now a doctor, and she seems to be doing pretty well. So I figure I did something right. I don't know what it was. And it basically sort of turned out properly. But finally I decided, well, look, what is it that you do know about? Well, what I do know about, as Scott, one of the songs being for Claude earlier today, people were looking at, where I was talking about the number, somebody was reversing eating pattern, which I was picking up the number of people I had been to bed with. And we got through the last, 20-something years, maybe 8,000 people. And everybody applauded. And altogether, I have to work it out. If you start from the very, very beginning, when it was Eric's age, it's more like 50,000. One of them, many hundreds of thousands. But by and large, it's a So that's why there was a very definite issue. I figured I could be more honest and I had more to say about the gay situation, which is a subset. You know, the gay oppression is a subset of the oppression of women. You know, and there's no question about it.
Okay, so I've been given my marching orders.
How much time do we have at the end?
Let's go on for 10 more minutes.
So,
and then there'll be an elegant reception.
So we